So you have used this deck as long as anyone in the market has, and I'm curious just to know about the power of imagery and how that sparks a deeper, richer conversation, facilitation, learning for the people in your sessions.
First of all, it engages them more thoroughly, right? Because it involves like all parts of the brain. So, if I'm just asking someone a question, it just triggers the left side of the brain, very linear logical. And it's also easier for them to self-judge before they even say things. And so I think what the images do is get them thinking about things differently. So, and when you're using an image, I stress there's no right or wrong way to interpret the image. The only way you can fail is by not saying anything. And so I think the other thing that the images do is they have the potential to trigger a thought that that person would have not had on their own. So we have this huge, vast array of experience, all that information that's in our brain, and at any given time, we're probably only accessing a tiny part of it because we're looking for something. Whereas if we see something, we may see things that were not even in it. We weren't even aware that we are aware of them. So it gets a much broader engagement of the individual. And I think, well, everything I do is to try to be as engaging of the audience as possible. So I find it's easier. There's less judgment of themselves. There's less judgment of others. There's always opportunities for multiple interpretations. So it reinforces the notion of there's no one right way. In NLP, they talk about people that are visually oriented, auditorial oriented, or kinesthetic orientation. And that to me, I just had a conversation on my podcast the other day about that. This is the way that people take in information. Once it's in there, we tend to form images. In fact, there's the fellow I was interviewing who has his book was on the importance of imagination, imagination, and some of those images are triggered by words, by thoughts, by touch and things like that. So I think having images makes it easier because it's already in that mode, if that makes sense. It doesn't need to be translated in the same way as something I hear or something I read or something I touch.
Very, very true. And, there's an interesting activity I choose to do at the cards every once in a while, especially if there's a controversial something in the atmosphere. Most recently, I did it with 3 Catholic churches in the States that the bishop said, you will be merging into one. So I asked them, okay, if we're going to merge the leadership of these 3 church parishes, organizations, what are some of the images that represent the kind of leadership we need more of? And what are the images that we could use less of? And it was interesting how they were willing to pick an image that represented something they wanted less of without having described the situation, right? And it made it very easy for them.